Hello, everybody. Welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope we're doing well. And today we're doing a box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Moana 2, Wicked, and Gladiator bring in the vast majority of the funds, leading to, at least according to some box office so-called experts, the greatest Thanksgiving numbers of all time, a $420 million domestic take over 5 days. And obviously, these are all not adjusted for inflation, which means, yes, this is impressive. No matter how you spin it, no matter what you bring up, these are just very good raw numbers, but it does also have to be said that unless we are actually going to be comparing apples to apples with ticket sales and also total grosses that have been adjusted, again, it really isn't fair to say, just flat out, oh, this is the record-setting movie and this is the record-setting weekend, et cetera, et cetera. You all know I've been on this constantly for many, many years now whenever they come up with new record, whatever the film might be, even if I like the film or not. Regardless of any of that thing, though, right, Moana 2, Wicked, Gladiator 2 are all doing very, very well here in the domestic box office, with, of course, the big caveat for Gladiator 2 being the fact that it cost a crap ton of money, and as of right now, it is not really on pace to make its money back. It definitely got a bit of a benefit, I think, from the holiday frame, but it's still the lowest between these three by quite a bit, especially when you take into account the fact that Moana 2 has only just released this past week, did not open last weekend, and so therefore is already getting $100 million more domestic than Gladiator 2, and obviously very different audiences are being sought after in those numbers, but it is still a difference that needs to be pointed out nonetheless, and especially when you talk about the comparisons between Moana 2 and Wicked, Moana 2 is eating Wicked's lunch. And with the reports of Wicked's marketing budget apparently being an insane amount of money, right? This movie costs around $150 million to make, and there's projections that the marketing could have been anywhere between $300+ million. If that is indeed the case, then what seems to be a film on pace to break even very, very soon and make some profit to boot may not actually do so. And again, take that with a grain of salt. These are based off of these media reports that are out there of the marketing costs for this movie, but they do have to be taken into account. You do have to obviously listen to those numbers because the numbers are what they are, right? We can't just say, oh, well, I like this movie, and so therefore I must say that this movie is a huge box office hit, or I don't like this movie, and so therefore I must say that this is a box office loser. I'm always going to talk the numbers straight. I'm always going to give it to you straight, and that is exactly what you come to here on this channel. You come here for the raw data and information. So let's just go ahead and dive right into it then. Moana 2, coming off the weekend, right, this is the 3-day total of $135.5 million, with a total through its 5-day opening of $221 million domestic. So this is just really, really impressive. Whether you take the $100+ million 3-day opening or add on top of that those 2 extra days where it was able to make almost another $100 million, yeah, this is just darn impressive, especially when you go back just to the daily numbers and look at Moana 2's single day opening versus what even Wicked was doing back on Wednesday. It's actually pretty interesting. We'll go ahead and try and do that live. Of course, the numbers usually around this time is starting to slow down. For very good reason, of course, because when you think about all of these things, let me see if I can find another way of finding it. Shark Index, maybe that's how I can find it a bit faster. But when you have a lot of people who are checking the box office numbers and you have a lot of numbers being updated in the background, it can slow things quite down quite a bit. We'll see if I'm actually able to work this thing out. We are currently in the month, the year of our Lord, December 2024, and we are looking for the Wednesday opening numbers for the movie. And obviously, I am trying to talk my best through this. Anyway, let's go ahead and pull this up while we're waiting. Tony over at Deadline. I haven't talked about Tony in a while, but I had to because Tony has the headline, which is Thanksgiving 5-day U.S. box office hits amazing all-time $420 million high. AMC boss Adam Aron declares a national phenomenon. And though many people tried to make Glicked a thing, right? Gladiator and Wicked, very astroturfy. That really did not actually happen, right? This movie is in the photo here, but really when you compare apples to apples, it's really the Moana Wicked show. This is something that I called last week, and I said, you know what? I don't think that Glicked is going to be anywhere close to being a thing. It's much more going to be like a Micked situation or a Mowicked or however it is that you want to say, right? These are the two movies that are really dominating the box office and are driving the vast majority of people out there, especially in those key demographics of people that actually still show up to the cinema. Whereas a film like Gladiator 2 is able to drive out some of those older audiences. Those older audiences make up a much smaller percentage of overall movie-going peoples these days. And so because of that, your kids and your families and that younger audience that is drawn to things like Wicked or even Moana, those are going to be your audiences that are going to have the biggest market share. And sure enough, that $420 million, the vast majority of that is coming, almost half of that, in fact, is coming from the likes of Moana, with maybe a third of that coming from, a third of the rest of it coming from, or actually a larger portion than that if we're talking about just the rest of it, coming from Wicked, with a very small portion actually being made up for by Gladiator 2. Having seen Gladiator 2, I could say the film is a snooze fest. And so honestly, I'm surprised it's doing as well as it is. I think it's because of what's going on with Moana and Wicked that is probably getting a little bit of tailwind, I guess you could say, to bring it forward and to bring it further along than it probably has any right to be. But when you look at the numbers really aren't looking all that great for it when you compare it to its budget. Whereas for Moana and Wicked, very good signs there. Moana is set to break even probably by the end of next weekend, in fact, because of how well it's doing both domestic and international. Whereas for Wicked, doing very well domestic, not nearly as hot international, right? This is something that's been talked about, that, hey, this is not an international property. It's going to do better internationally than I think people suspect, because it has a huge presence. This IP of Wicked has a huge international presence, has been adapted several times over in many different languages across many different cultures. And so you're going to have a lot of people show up more than you think, but it's definitely not going to be a international juggernaut by any means. And that is indeed playing out in the numbers as they currently stand. But again, comparing those to Gladiator, it's just not even fair. All right, let's see. Those Wednesday numbers finally did load up. And so yeah, Moana 2, as you can see right there, as a new release, $57.5 million to the Wicked's $20.4 million. As I mentioned before, Moana 2 has kind of been eating its lunch ever since the daily started, right? You go on to the next Thursday, 28 versus 17. So a little bit of a recovery there for Wicked, not nearly as impressive of a drop there. But then you go on to Friday, 54 to 32. All right, so starting to pick up a little bit. And then the weekend, of course, is going to be where those families really come out. 50.5 to 30. Again, very strong numbers still for Wicked, but Moana 2 is definitely edging it out in this day-to-day numbers. 30 versus 18 for the number 2 spots on the Sunday numbers. And then getting back into the weekend chart, as you can see, right, just from the 3-day 4 through Friday through Sunday, right, all those numbers add up to 135 versus $80 million. So still very strong numbers, right? Wicked dropping only 29% from its second weekend, and obviously it also had the benefit of a holiday week. And so it was able to pick up some extra money in those day-to-day performances. So there's no denying the fact that this movie is tracking to be able to end north of $350 million domestic. I mean, we're talking about possibly even a $400+ million domestic release for Wicked. That's a very, very good number. Now, as I mentioned before, it may not be enough to make up for its marketing budget if the marketing is as high as some suspect. Shout out to Valiant Renegade, who's been kind of calling this out. I bet he's been getting a lot of hate comments, because I know I have, when I haven't even been going after the movie. I've just been saying, hey, here's the numbers as they currently stand, and here's what I think is going to happen. And sure enough, Moana 2 is eating its lunch. They're both doing well, right? Two things can be true at once. Moana 2 can be dominating up against Wicked, and both of them could still also be doing really well. So yeah, Moana 2 took the number 1 spot. Wicked taking the number 2 spot, holding very strong. Gladiator 2, right, dropping only 44%. So again, percentage-wise, we would have to say, all right, that's a pretty good number there. But $30.7 million, in addition to the holiday frame numbers, only brings its domestic to $111.2 million. Now, some might say, okay, well, as a rated R movie in this category, right, in this genre, that's actually a pretty good number. That might be the case. The problem, of course, is the film costs a crap ton of money to make. And because of that, no matter how well it even does, it's not looking like it's going to actually have any chance of breaking even, maybe an outside chance of breaking even, but I don't think the film is good enough to be able to have that type of longevity, and we'll go into those numbers once we get into the charts. Red 1 from Amazon dropping 2%. So again, as you can see, just because you have strong holds from Wicked and Gladiator 2, right, the percentage holds tell part of the story, but not the entirety of it, right? Even films like Red 1, which have gotten universally panned, only dropped 2%, and that's after dropping from 600 screens. Best Christmas Pageant ever saw a pretty strong hold of 4%. Bonhoeffer from Angel Studios dropped 52%, quite a big drop there, and based off of the numbers, not looking like that film's going to make its money back. Venom Last Dance, 43% drop there for that movie. Again, just continuing to add on to its profits. Heretic adding on from A24. Wild Robot, the number 9 spot, the number 10 spot, going from Fox Searchlight's A Real Pain, which I've heard some pretty good things about. Let's go into the individual numbers worldwide here. Moana 2 at $386.3 million. That's just really impressive. We have not seen openings like this in quite a long time. I was saying this now for many months now, that I thought Moana 2 was going to be the sleeper hit of 2024, and sure enough, yeah, I think this is going to be the case. And in fact, because of how the film is tracking domestically and internationally, I think that Moana 2 is the more likely film to reach $1 billion by the end of its run than even Wicked, right? I still thought, and still have a certain thought to to a certain extent that $1 billion is not off the table for a film like Wicked. However, because of how poorly Wicked is doing internationally, or how not as well it's doing internationally, again, language here, I think that is going to be kind of the showcase of Moana 2 being a very huge, right, already at $386 million. Remember, you have films, if you think about films, for instance, like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, like a Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness. That film had a $450 million worldwide opening weekend, and because of a massive week 2 drop-off because the movie was complete trash, it ended up not doing well. Now, Moana 2 has not gotten that great reviews from critics and from people in our space. That being said, a lot of families seem to really be enjoying this movie, and there's no denying the fact that when it comes to holiday films, when it comes to movies coming out in early December, these are the times in which families are going to see movies. These are the times in which people are trying to find things to do. Moana 2 is going to check off a lot of those boxes that are going to make a lot of people very happy. And so I think because of that, Moana 2 has a lot of legs left. And again, with these type of domestic international splits, we can suspect that this movie will probably have a very long life. Has not even released in Japan yet, so that's going to be another factor for it internationally. That does not get released there until the 26th until the 6th of December. So until next weekend, we'll get some numbers there. But I think $1 billion Moana 2 on the table. Wicked, it's a bit of a mixed bag, to be perfectly honest, right? $359 million worldwide after 2 weeks. That's very, very good, right? But again, I think that this international distinction between these two movies I've just mentioned kind of tells you the story. Moana 2 opening weekend at $386 million, right? With that holiday frame in there. Wicked has that same holiday frame to work with. In addition to that, it has a second weekend to work with, and Wicked only got to $359 million. So already Moana 2 has outpaced Wicked's total box office because of those internationals and because of that massive international difference. So that is going to be a major factor going into it, which is why if either of them is going to do $1 billion, it's going to be Moana 2, or at the very least, it's going to get to that $1 billion mark faster. And there's a good chance now, because of these internationals from Wicked, that it might do very well domestically, but not enough international to be able to hit that number, right? We're talking about, for Wicked domestic, maybe $400+ million being in the cards for the total run of that movie. That would mean it would need to make $500 to $600 million international. $96.8 million after 2 weeks of international release? Yeah, I'm sorry. That don't smell right. There's nothing to indicate that that's going to be changing anytime soon. I don't think that China is going to be coming out in a massive way for this movie. Japan doesn't come out until March. I don't think that market's going to come out massive for this movie. There really just are no international markets left to drive this film out there. And again, this is not a terrible international. If we're talking about $1 billion films, those are built off of having giant international releases, or at the very least, having very strong domestic and international. This is just having a good domestic showing, not as much international. Gladiator 2 showing a much stronger international flavor and not as strong domestically, but it's the budget that's really going to hurt this movie down the line. Red One, $148 million. This film's budget also just is going to keep this film from ever being anything other than a massive flop. And then this best Christmas pageant ever, doing better than I think anyone would have ever expected it to actually do. Going over to the charts, because we love charts on OMB Reviews. I've had some issues, unfortunately, with the numbers.com, so I've had to revamp the charts using Box Office Mojo. I'm not a fan of Box Office Mojo. Their numbers update a lot later. In fact, it was as I was just about to hit record on this that the charts finally started to update. And so if there's ever any issues with this, please just know is because there's something happening on the back end of the numbers.com for some reason. So let's first talk about Moana 2, right? So this movie, as I mentioned, $221 million domestic, $165 million international. No China money being reported as of yet, but because of that, that means right now the film is only at $37 million in the red. And again, this is obviously projected based off of a budget of $150 million. Last I checked, there had not been an official budget. Now, obviously, we will do this live because we love doing things live here in real time over on OMB Reviews. So as you can see, nothing be reported. Nothing's at least being mentioned over on Wikipedia. We'll go ahead and put this in on Google. Again, it's mentioning $150 million. The reason why is because that was the cost of the first movie. So take that with a grain of salt. This film could obviously have cost a lot more than that. Now, this was also originally going to be a show, and then they decided to scrap the show and revamp it as a movie, which means they may have actually been able to save some money for that very reason. However, that being said, one could still see them spending a lot more because Disney is notorious for overspending on movies. And so whether this film costs $150 million or even $200+ million, the film is still doing well enough to where it's going to break past either of those points. But if it is closer to this $150 million mark, we're talking about massive return on investment for this movie. So turns out, yeah, good move on their part. We may not like it. We may see the film through a more critical lens and be more realistic with how bad the movie might actually be. Kind of like a Frozen 2 situation where, yeah, it made a lot of money, but Frozen 2 is really just not a good movie when you look at the brass tacks of it, right? And doesn't matter, though, because, hey, it's selling tickets, it's making money, and that's going to make Disney ultimately very, very happy. And it also is going to guarantee that Disney is going to be nothing but a bunch of sequels, threequels, whatever it might be, into the future. And that is basically where they've been pushing. And here's the reason why, because this is the stuff that for some reason people would rather go to see. Gladiator 2, $320 million. Again, very good numbers just from a pure worldwide total. But look at this $200 million loss is currently where this film is. So $200 million, it has to make well more than $200 million more in order to break even, right? Because of a massive $230 million budget. Could have been even higher. The last I checked, it was around $230 million. In fact, let's go ahead, just keep myself honest. Let's go ahead and look for this in real time to see if any of these numbers have been updated. So 210 to 310. So yes, it has actually been updated. So you could actually see this film costing upwards of $310 million, and that's before actual marketing. So hopefully you can see now why I think Gladiator 2, yeah, it might be doing well enough to be put into that, you know, that thumbnail on the Thanksgiving box office being this massive thing. And yeah, oh yeah, this film's doing great for a rated R movie, whatever metric you want to use. The fact still remains, this film's budget is going to keep it from ever being a success. And this film ultimately will be one of the biggest flops of the year and couldn't have happened to a better movie, because the movie honestly is just complete trash. Now going to Wicked, $359 million. Again, this film also seems to be on track to make its money back, right? $37.3 million loss right now for Moana 2. Wicked being out for an extra week is down 41.9. So they're very, very close, though obviously Moana 2 has the edge because it's made a lot more money a lot quicker. The fact still remains is that the budget for Wicked is a lot smaller, right? They spent around $30 million on both part 1 and part 2 of Wicked, and so again, you edge that out into about $150 million or so. The real question mark is going to be over that marketing cost, though. Did the marketing actually balloon the total cost to a much higher number, right? We're talking about a total cost being between $300 to $500 million is being reported. And if that is the case, that changes the game quite a bit, right? This changes the film from being what is likely to be a very massive success, even with a poor international showing, and instead could potentially turn it into a film that barely breaks even or even loses out on some money. Now, I don't think that it's going to lose money in the long run. I think that it's going to be able to, sell a lot of VOD, sell a lot of Blu-ray, things like that, especially after the fact. So it has a lot of options post-theatrical. I think it's going to be able to really make some money there. But as in addition to just raw numbers, raw totals-wise, make a lot of money at the box office. But again, you have to take into account budgets. You cannot ignore budgets. You cannot ignore these facts. And the facts are that Wicked, though it's doing very well, if that number, again, that's a big if that number is as high as is being projected by some, that marketing cost being as high as it's being projected, that could cut into these profits and could even lead it into the negative territory. We'll have to wait and see. I'll have to actually, dig deeper into those numbers, but I did want to mention those in case anyone is a fan of Valiant Renegade and the likes of him, because again, he does a lot of really great work. They've always been very, very, have a lot of respect towards him. That can't be the same thing here about Gladiator 2, though, because that film is just going to be a flop. But Offer, unfortunately, also now after 2 weeks, is expected to be a flop as well. $32 million in the red. We're projecting that film to lose between $25 and $29 million. Kind of just seems to be the state of Angel Studios these days. They really just can't get anything off the ground. I think that a lot of people got kind of way ahead of themselves with the success of Sound of Freedom, and I think people just often forget that the huge reason why that was a big success was because of the subject matter and because of how it exposed it, and because you're not really having that with these more historic-based films like Bonhoeffer, or even more faith-based films like Sound of Hope, which are all, again, I think great movies. They're solid movies. It's just not enough to bring a lot of other people out there. So yeah. And speaking of films bringing film out there, so Gladiator 2, just talking about the raw numbers there, it has projected to lose around $70 million. Now, it has a chance, it has an opportunity to get upwards of $39 million in net profit. But just, again, someone who's speaking here from experience of having covered the box office, based off of where it is tracking right now, I would just not be surprised if Gladiator 2 had a massive drop-off in week 3. Maybe even a massive drop-off as of Monday when you don't have that holiday frame going for it. I don't think the word of mouth on the movie is strong enough to be able to really help leg this film out, especially domestically, where you get a much larger cut as a studio. And as those costs become a lot more clear, just how close to $300 million that this movie actually cost, that again also raises those projections where we're probably looking at being closer to a $100+ million loss when everything is said and done. But again, have to wait for those numbers. Whereas a film like Wicked, projected to be $100+ million, as far as net profits are concerned. Again, same thing though. Marketing costs in this case with Wicked, you could potentially see Wicked get a $100 to $200 million, windfall, right? $100 to $200 million massive profit margin be evaporated because of just an excess in marketing costs. So those are the numbers currently as they stand, though. What are y'all's thoughts? Do you think that Moana 2 is going to be the first film to hit $1 billion? Do you think that neither of the films between Moana 2 and Wicked are going to hit $1 billion? Let me know your thoughts about that. Anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button. Allow that fire button over on Odyssey. Smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A blessed first Sunday of Advent. Also, thank you guys very much for understanding why my videos have not been going up. I had travels this past week. My voice was crap as of last weekend, and so that really just kind of cut into things. And so, again, I do appreciate y'all understanding. Hope to get some member stuff out very, very soon, and also my December's shout-out video done as well. But as of today, just have not had the time or the voice to do so. Just glad to be back in the chair doing this stuff. So anyway, you guys are great. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and as always, God bless. Now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illich and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.